Second reading for ordinance 2021-103. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into a 3-year contract with the International Association of Firefighters, Local 381, AFL-CIO, effective January 1st, 2022, expiring December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser.
There's been considerable conversation around the contracts, and my question to council is, do we have any additional questions that would need to be answered in executive session about the fire and police contracts? If not, and everybody's satisfied with where we stand on this, I would make a motion that council's rules be suspended and we give this ordinance its third reading.
Second, Mr. Haas. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
And Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2021-103.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Mr. Stasiak.
Again, I apologize. I wasn't aware that that might happen tonight, that you might push this through as an emergency. My staff is through a large portion of the agreements in terms of the programming issues and what we're looking at. I know they've already identified 1 or 2 areas where there'll have to be memorandums of understanding with regards to the contract. I don't have the details. I assumed at some point there would be an executive session to discuss some of those things, and it was our intent to be prepared to get everything over to our safety service director here sometime in the next week, so they had them well prior to your next council meeting. So that's where we stand. We weren't involved and did not see the agreements prior to them. It was just like a couple weeks before they came to council with regard to the timing. So I'm sorry, that's where we're at, though.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Wobser.
In conversations with the safety service director this week, and we were satisfied that there were no additional major changes in the contract of material, financial matters beyond the main portions, of course. So I'm still satisfied with where we sit today.
Hearing no other discussion or questions, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
And Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.
Second reading for ordinance 2021-104. An ordinance authorizing the mayor of the city of Findlay, Ohio to enter into 3-year contracts with the Ohio Patrolmen's Benevolent Association on behalf of the divisions of dispatch, patrol officers, sergeants, and lieutenants in the Findlay, Ohio Police Department, effective January 1st, 2022, and December 31st, 2024, and declaring expiring December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Wobser.
Same question to council on this contract or on this ordinance as I had on the previous.
I hear none.
And if that's the case, then I would make a motion that we suspend rules and give this its third reading.
Second, Mr. Haas. All those in favor of suspending the rules say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
Mr. Schindeldecker.
Aye.
Mr. Slough.
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki.
Aye.
Mr. Wobser.
Aye.
Mr. Greeno.
Aye.
Mr. Haas.
Aye.
Mr. Hellman.
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer.
Aye.
Mr. Palmer.
Aye.
The rules of council have been suspended, and the clerk will give the ordinance its third reading.
Ordinance 2021-104.
Mr. Wobser.
Make a motion to approve.
Second, Mr. Greeno. Discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of the ordinance say aye if your name is called. Those opposed, nay.
Mr. Schindeldecker,
Aye.
Mr. Slough,
Aye.
Ms. Warnicki,
Aye.
Mr. Wobser,
Aye.
Mr. Greeno,
Aye.
Mr. Haas,
Aye.
Mr. Hellman,
Aye.
Mr. Niemeyer, Mr. Palmer,
Aye.
Mr. Russell.
Aye.
The ordinance is adopted.